Hello scholars, welcome to the 8th video series about early presidents in the United States. Today we're going to explore the chapter about John Monroe and the second Adams presidency. If you recall, yesterday we talked about the War of 1812, how the White House was burned down by the Redcoats, and how the United States doubled its size through the Louisiana Purchase. So let's move on. The objective of today's scholars is that I can explain Monroe's foreign policy and the Monroe Doctrine. This is going to be a very important piece of legislation, of policy that will guide America's relationship with other countries, especially European countries, and how the Americans view themselves as the main country with executing the most influence in the continent. We're going to touch base about this policy because even today it still has a major impact. Okay, scholars, so as I talked in our previous slide, the main concept is the Monroe Doctrine. If you can see this image, it is portraying Uncle Sam. That's the way the United States is represented. And if you can see, we see Uncle Sam representing the United States on the top of the North Pole, looking throughout the whole American continent. And on the other hand are the Europeans. So that means that the Monroe Doctrine is dividing influence areas. The United States is telling the European powers, you will not have influence, geopolitical influence in America. I'm going to be the one ruling in this area, influencing other countries and their relationships. So this is very important because it's America viewing themselves as an important actor in international relationship and also as a growing power. And all of this happened because the United States in the 1820s, 1830s, they were growing economically. With expansion to the West, many people start creating more businesses, then the trains, the steam boats, everything was interconnected in the North American continent, in North America, in the United States. So money was going around and the United States was becoming a powerful nation. Okay, scholars, so please open your packet to the page with the reader and let's read today's chapter. Chapter 8, Monroe and the Second Adams. James Monroe. Have you noticed that except for John Adams of Massachusetts, all of America's early presidents came from the state of Virginia? The man who followed James Madison in the presidency was another Virginian. His name was James Monroe. Monroe was the last president to come from the generation that had taken part in the birth of our nation. Like those other Virginian presidents, he came from a well-to-do family. He was a college student when fighting broke out between the colonies and Great Britain. He promptly left his studies and joined General Washington's army. He fought in a number of important battles. After the war, Monroe studied law and then held a number of important jobs in the national government. He was one of the people President Jefferson sent to France to buy Louisiana. He later served as Madison's Secretary of State. Much about James Monroe seemed old-fashioned. He even dressed in an old-fashioned way, wearing knee pants long after most men had switched to trousers. He wore shoes with silver bucklets and wore his hair in a pigtail, both of which had gone out of style many years before. Still, people seemed to like Monroe. Perhaps they felt comfortable with him. Perhaps it was because he didn't lecture them. Like those earlier presidents, he knew a lot about farming. Like them, he loved books and learning. And like them, he believed in duty to his community and his country. Also, everyone agreed that he was an honest as a day is long. That's a lot of things to like about a person. When Monroe ran for re-election in 1820, no one ran against him. However, that was just because he was well liked. It was because of an important change in the political parties. The Federalists had not won an election since John Adams was president, second president of the United States, before 1800. Over the years, Federalist Party had become less and less popular. Many Federalists had opposed the War of 1812, and some even sounded like they would be happier if the Union of States broke up. That's not a good way to win elections. When Monroe ran for the first term, the Federalist Party wasn't able to offer much opposition. By the time he ran for a second term, the Federalist Party was much in decline. Spain loses power and colonies. Spain once had the largest colonial empire in the world. The Spanish had controlled all of Central America, nearly all of South America, and a big chunk of North America as well. But those days were gone. In the 1800s, Spain was a weaker nation. Many of its colonies in the Americas were overthrowing Spanish rule. Spain still claimed Florida, but it had only a handful of settlements there, and it was clear that there will never be more. Most of Florida was home to the Seminoles, a large group of Native Americans. Sometimes Seminoles will cross the border into the state of Georgia and raid Georgians' farms. The Spanish government had promised to prevent those raids. It did not. However, have nearly enough soldiers in Florida to do so. Plantation owners in southern states were also upset. Their slave workers often ran away to Florida, a place that represented freedom. Because Florida was not part of the United States, they could not get them back. After another Seminole raid into Georgia, President Monroe sent General Andrew Jackson to deal with them. Jackson's army pursued the Seminoles into Florida, battled them, and burned their villages and crops. Jackson also marched into several of the Spanish forts and took them over. General Jackson had gone much farther than he was supposed to, and Spain protested. President Monroe ordered Jackson to pull his forces out of Florida. But by then, everyone could see how weak Spain was. America knew that Spain was not hoped to hang on Florida. Spain knew it too. Monroe's Secretary of State was John Quincy Adams, son of the second President of the United States. Adams offered Spain $5 million for Florida, and Spain accepted. In 1821, Florida was officially added to the ever-growing United States. By that time, nearly all Spain colonies had won their independence. Many of these newly independent nations, such as Argentina and Bolivia in South America, looked to the United States as an example of how to set up new governments. They wrote constitutions that used many of the same ideas, and even some of them, I'm going to read the caption. Despite the destruction of their villages and crops, the Seminoles were not defeated. Even after 2 wars with the U.S. Army and relocation to Indian Territory, the Seminoles never admitted defeat. Let's continue. And even some to the Potomac River and swam and bathed. After that, he was ready to start his workday. Adams was very bright, hardworking, and honest. Like his father, he believed in doing what was right, not what was popular. And he had many good ideas, including building a national university and better roads to tie the nation together. Unfortunately, he was unable to get support for these ideas. In part, that was because many members of Congress still supported Andrew Jackson, and opposed everything that Adams wanted. They thought the federal government spending money on roads and bridges was unconstitutional. It also was because other congressmen just did not agree with his ideas. And finally, it was because John Quincy Adams did not believe the president should try to persuade members of Congress to follow him. He believed that presidents should just present ideas, and then it was up to Congress to consider them. But that's really not the way to be a successful president. Even if Adams tried to persuade members of Congress to support his ideas, he probably will not have been good at it. He was not an easy man to warm up to. So, even though John Quincy Adams had a great training and a great ability, he did not become a great president. Like his father, he was unable to get re-elected. When he ran for a second term, he was again opposed by Andrew Jackson. This time, Jackson won. I want to share with you, scholars, an image of President James Monroe. Okay. Now, I want to share again with you a couple images about the War of 1812. Here we have the redcoats burning the White House and other governmental buildings in Washington, and we have here the Blue Jackets. Who can tell me the name of a team that plays in Columbus? The Blue Jackets. So the Columbus Blue Jackets, the hockey team, got that name because in Columbus people were making blue jacket uniforms for the army. So we can see that's the color chosen by the US Army. Okay, scholars. So I want to touch base again about the Monroe Doctrine. As a person that really likes history and geography, it's very interesting to see how much influence the US had in the whole continent. For example, think for a second that you are an Argentinian and you are having your own country, your own government, and the Europeans came to your country to take some of your land. The United States see that as an aggression or as an act of war towards them, even though they are separated for thousands of miles. That means that the United States view themselves as the only superpower able to influence everything in the American continent. This is a very important shift of mentality of the United States. So let's learn more about the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine, December 2nd, 1823. Cornerstone of the U.S. foreign policy. Enunciated by President James Monroe in his annual message to Congress, declaring that the Old World and New World had different systems and must remain distinct spheres. Monroe made out 4 basic points. Number 1, the United States will not interfere in the internal affairs of or the wars between European powers. So we are not messing with them, with Europeans. They want to have their wars. The US will not participate. Number 2, the United States recognized that and will not interfere with existing colonies and dependencies in the Western Hemisphere. So if England has a colony in India, the United States will not participate in or engage in any affair that will jeopardize Great Britain's power in India. Number 3, the Western Hemisphere was closed to future colonization. That means that Europeans, Spaniards, French, Dutch, whoever cannot come again and start taking land in the Caribbean, in South America. No way, colonization is over. And number 4, any attempt by a European power to oppress or control any nation in the Western Hemisphere will be viewed as a hostile act against the United States. So this is very important. This is also retrieved from Britannica.com. It's an amazing resource, scholars. It's free, so I highly recommend you to explore articles in Britannica.com. So this is very important because the first time the United States is viewing themselves as a power that can compete with European powers. So far, Europeans had all the influence in the world. They colonized America. They were colonizing Africa. They were colonizing Asia. But the United States, after their independence, after War of 1812, after start connecting the eastern and the western coast through steamboats and then through trains, they said they view themselves as a superpower. So let's now review scholars' core vocabulary for chapter number 8. Colonial empire. A group of countries or territories that are controlled by people from another country. As a Colombian, Colombia was part of the Spaniard Empire. It was called Nueva Granada before it adopted the name of Colombia. The same as the United States was not called the United States. It was the 13 colonies. Monroe Doctrine, a statement of U.S. foreign policy that opposed European involvement in the Western Empire. Hey, Europe, do you want to conquest Africa? Go for it. Do you want to conquest Asia? Go for it. Nothing in the Western Hemisphere. That's why in this image, scholars, the US is tracing a line in the sand, telling the European powers, stay there and I'll stay here. Because if you interfere with my area of influence here in this part of the Western Hemisphere, that will be perceived as a declaration of war. So that will be the end of this lesson, scholars. Please make sure that you're watching this complementary video about the Monroe Doctrine. It's very cool. I really like it. It's not super long, so I hope you really enjoy it and you gain more influence, get more knowledge about this policy that influence American foreign policy, actions, and relationship with other countries. Okay, scholars, that will be the end of today's lesson. Please make sure that you are reviewing your reader to complete your packet of today. Don't forget to closely read your introduction as it's giving you core information about today's chapter. Don't forget to share with me the answers that have a start in your packet. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope all of you are staying safe at home. I miss you very much, and I hope all of you are having a wonderful rest of the day. See you tomorrow in our online lessons. Thank you so much, scholars. Have a good one. Bye-bye.